Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I echo the words of the Cabinet Secretary and put on record my thanks to all the parliamentary staff and the very hard-working Bill team. Presiding Officer, it is with regret that I believe that this bill has shown this Parliament at its worst. The debate over this bill has been sorely missing compromise by the Government for women across Scotland. The Government has not sought to achieve consensus, nor has it made a serious attempt to bring people together. Women have real fears on the consequences of this bill, and they have been ignored. The First Minister has dismissed justified and legitimate concerns as not valid. So I want to begin by taking the opposite approach, a focus initially on where we can mostly agree. I can endorse much of what the Government and MSPs across this chamber say when it comes to improving the process for trans people. I believe in the principle that nobody in society should suffer because of who they are, and that everyone should be free to go about their lives as they please, within the scope of the law. The administrative process of changing gender should be simple for trans people. It shouldn't be overly intrusive, burdensome, or indeed in any way demeaning. And on those points, I am sure a majority of the Scottish public would agree. But they do not agree with the reforms in this bill. The public are not on the side with these changes. A clear majority are against this legislation, as shown in recent polls. Nicola Sturgeon has not brought the people of Scotland with her. In the rush to make the process a little easier for trans people, the Government is making it easier for criminal men to attack women. That's the problem here. Yes.
Julian Martin.
I'm very grateful to Rachael Hamilton for taking my intervention. Would she agree that the amendments that I took forward at stage 3 actually mean that men on the sexual offences register are actually risk assessed so that they cannot apply for a GRC, and they have the effect that that has the effect that Russell Finlay wanted to have in stage 2.
Rachael Hamilton.
I don't agree that Gillian Martin's amendments go far enough and that they should have been more robust. This Parliament should have voted for Michelle Thompson's amendments, supported by my colleague Russell Finlay, to ensure that we don't allow sex offenders to get in the single-sex spaces of women. Back to the public, they do not agree with the reforms in this bill. The public are not on the side with these changes. In the rush to make the process a little easier for trans people, the Government are making it easier for criminal men to attack women, and that is the problem that I am trying to identify with Gillian Martin, and clearly this Parliament is split on that. The bill makes it vastly easier to obtain a gender recognition certificate, but it doesn't just do that for trans people, it does that for violent males too. It will let criminals exploit the system, which puts women at risk in all kinds of places, but especially it endangers women at shelters for victims of domestic and sexual abuse. Not at the moment. I'd like to make a little bit of progress, thank you. The UN Special Rapporteur, Reem Al-Salem, raised many serious concerns about this bill. She was right in saying that this bill is a threat to women in all their diversity. As she said and made clear, dangerous men are a threat not only to biological women but to trans women too. So today, the Scottish Conservatives are not just talking about protecting women's safety, we're talking about protecting everyone's safety. Society as a whole is at risk from this bill. While most of us across Scotland are good, decent, reasonable people, rapists are not, sex offenders are not. It is ignorant in the extreme to believe that they will not take advantage of loopholes that are ripe for exploitation. As J.K. Rowling wrote recently, nobody but the very naive can fail to be aware that predatory men are capable of going to great lengths to gain access to victims. These legitimate worries cannot be dismissed as scaremongering. That is an insult to every survivor of sexual assault and domestic abuse. Women don't have a phobia of trans people. We have a phobia of violent men. Nobody needs to be scaremongering over the appalling levels of violence that women face. There is no need for exaggeration. Violence against women is the unfortunate, harsh reality of our society. So I want to ask every MSP here today, how can we allow a bill to pass that risks the safety of women in Scotland? This Parliament has to think about the message that it sends to young women.
We will hear Ms Hamilton. Thank you. Sorry, do continue.
Young women like my daughters. The warm words recited in this chamber about women's rights are spoken often, but I'm no longer sure they are meant. My colleague Russell Finley's amendment to prevent those on sex offenders register from obtaining a GRC was shamefully voted down by a very small majority. Not just now, thank you, Sue Webber. We have been shown countless times by those giving evidence that predatory sex offenders will exploit Nicola Sturgeon's gender self-ID experiment. This amendment would have no impact on trans people, but would simply protect the lives of women across Scotland from violent sexual offenders. How would MSPs around me today vote against that? It's indefensible. Yet through this process, while Scottish Conservative MSPs have worked constructively with MSPs of all parties to try and improve this bill, this coalition government has not engaged in good faith. Yes, I'll take an intervention.
Thank the member for taking an intervention. It's on that point because the member was on the committee with me. I wonder why the Conservatives have not tried to put out pardon me, what we heard in committee, which I'm sure you will agree was the overwhelming evidence that some of the concerns that you're raising have not come to fruition elsewhere. And why have you not tried to show the public the evidence that we heard was overwhelming?
Rachael Hamilton.
Well, I'm sorry to say, I very much respect my colleague Fulton McGregor, and we sit in committee together and we work very collegially together. But Fulton McGregor doesn't recognise that there are media reports that are suggesting that people are getting access into single-sex spaces, particularly in places like prisons, and we did hear that. Through this process, I have said we have worked constructively. No, thank you, Emma Roddick. It has been railroaded through this Parliament, and the debate has been shut down. The process, in my opinion, has been a complete sham. The evidence taken by the committee was limited. The range of experts called on was narrow and selective. It's unbelievable in this democracy that we've only heard evidence from the UN expert on violence against women and girls on Monday night, hours before the bill was debated in Parliament. The timetable for debate and scrutiny has been far too short. Yes.
I wonder if the member is aware
please.
that key human rights and women's organisations have written to Reem Al Salem expressing support for the bill and highlighting that they themselves were not consulted before her letter. They were Amnesty International Scotland and Gender Just Right Scotland, Scottish Women's Rights Centre, Scottish Women's Aid and Right Crisis Scotland. Do you think it would have been better for them to have also been consulted by the UN Rapporteur?
Absolutely.
In conclusion, Ms Hamilton.
Well, thank you. But Reem Salem is the UN Special Rapporteur for violence against women and girls. And did you read the letter from all the women's organisations talking very concernedly about your bill, the Scottish Government's bill? So, we rapidly debated difficult amendments that deserve proper consideration. There's been no good explanation of why this legislation must pass in 2022, 3 days before Christmas, when we could spend 2023 fixing its flaws. The result is a subpar, shoddy piece of legislation that is not fit to pass into law. And I know that you're asking me to conclude, but this bill will be a legacy issue for the First Minister, but not in the way she hopes, because J.K. Rowling won't wished, Joanne Lamont won't wished, Ash Reagan won't wished, women won't wished. This government has not listened, but our voices will be heard. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call